Let's talk about Game of Thrones Season 8. We're on episode 3 now. Starts out with a huge battle scene that never really goes anywhere, never really ends. I guess I can't say it doesn't go anywhere. I'm not going to spoil it for you if you haven't seen it. Okay. The battle plan's pretty dumb, though. Send the Dothrakis into an unknown and unseen enemy. Light their weapons on fire so we'll know how quickly they get run over for effect. And then send more forces into the same situation until everyone who needs to die to propel the plot are dead, and put everyone else in a crypt to wait out the carnage. People die, people don't die, people die again. Nobody can really determine what the hell is happening or who is dead or alive. And then something happens that's there's a callback. I'm not going to go too far into it. A lot of stupid shit happens for no other reason than to propel the plot forward, though. There, I saved you 90 minutes. That said, Game of Thrones is a decent enough show. I have a suspicion that George R.R. Martin is also a fan of Joseph Campbell's. I think this series is pretty goddamn archetypal, and the hero has 1,000 faces. I'll just say that. I'm not going to give any more spoilers than that. Arya. I think it's allegorical to geopolitics as well. The North is Russia, the West, Westeros is, well, the West. Nuclear proliferation in the form of dragons and daddies and archetypes. Oh my. It's a story older than humanity. And we love ourselves because we're all incestuous, narcissistic archetypes deep down inside. So, yeah, anyway, I haven't given it enough thought to speak on it at any great length, so I won't yet. So what else? How about this? How about we start out with this? I'm going to read you something. The Declaration of Independence. We the people hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Now, it's been said that there's nothing so wrong with America that cannot be rectified by what's right with it. I almost said what's white with it. That's how pathological this is. That would be a, what do you call that? Freudian slip, except for it wasn't about sex, it was about racism. Anyway. So what does it mean to be created equal? The God made us all tall, smart, and advantaged. Obviously, we're not all equal at all. Not in any given time, at any given thing. So, re-examine the Constitution, man. It's generally the right side of the political divide that revere the Constitution. It declares equal rights under the law. That requires that justice is prescient, okay? So, some on the right, the classically liberal, the libertarian, etc., pretend to champion equality of opportunity over equality of outcome. The people who lean right are generally people that look at educated people as the elite. They don't really know anything about political science. What they learn about history and economics, they learn from Glenn Beck or from hackneyed, uncredentialed philosophers or news pundits online or cable TV. The left generally have a broader view and have a more accurate idea of how we've gotten to this place, or for what motives and intentions. First and foremost, we are diversifying. They like to throw around this term hypergamy, the female reproductive behavior that has women choosing their males across and up on the social dominance hierarchy, has played a role in it, and white dudes are increasingly becoming displaced out of the gene reproduction game. Increasingly is the key word. They're having fewer and fewer mating options because there are fewer and fewer white people. Because more and more white people are viewing race as a social construct or something meaningless that should not even be considered in choosing a mate. Through hypergamy, white men are mating with brown women, creating fewer and fewer pure white people for racist white men to mate with. And you're looking at a result of that. I'm saying that this applies to all economies, financial as well as social. Jordan Peterson said something to this extent. Equality of opportunity, fair enough, laudable even. Opportunity of outcome, you've gone too far. He said that on a Big Think interview. I'm having a hard time actually uploading YouTube videos so that I can use and reference because of copyright infringement laws and proprietary software from Apple. It's kind of been a nightmare, and I've been rattling my brain trying to figure out how to get it done. I'm sure it can be, and eventually it will. So, Peterson also said on Joe Rogan Experience that nobody on the left is willing to debate him on equality of opportunity versus equality of outcome. And I would love to show you the clip where that happens. Maybe I'll post a link in the notes. It's just patently false. To any extent that it is true, it's true because nobody actually holds that belief. It's not a legitimate question. It's like the question, when did you stop beating your wife? You know, like, the question implies something likely untrue without a pre-context. When Peterson and Zizek were debating in Toronto last week, might have even been 2 weeks ago, he asked, "Are these neo-Marxists you believe are saturating academia and so on with toxic propaganda and so on? Where are they? Give me a name. Who are you talking about?" I'm paraphrasing, but the imitation is 100% legit. Peterson couldn't come up with an example of anyone who espouses these ideas, views, or attitudes because nobody does. He says we know when the right have gone too far. We don't know when the left have. Well, actually, we do know where the left goes too far. The left go too far when everyone to the right of their extreme is considered to be a Nazi. But in order for that to happen, they have to be a very small minority in a position of power. Power must be diffused, consolidated on the left to the extent that it actually is on the right. Okay? Because the government is controlled by the right, not the left. The right won the political war as of now, but the left won, or is at least winning, the culture war. That was considered liberal by all standards a decade ago, has now slid progressively and steadily to the center. Here's an example. It's not socially acceptable to be racist, sexist, or homophobic anymore. It's not PC to be Islamophobic. What's the difference? When we are casually calling Trump supporters Nazis and fascists, we are playing a pretty stupid and potentially dangerous game. So here's why it's a double-edged sword. For the entirety of his presidency, Glenn Beck and his acolytes would casually refer to Obama as a socialist, quote unquote. I think he's a socialist. He acts like some kind of socialist. What the right here is Obama is evil. What the left here is, if Obama is a socialist, socialism must not be all that bad. He's the best president we've had in decades. The right have chicken-littled the term, diluted it, really, of any meaning. They've maligned the term socialism into a term of endearment to the left. Now, the left are casually throwing around the terms like Nazi and fascist, and the danger is that conservatives will look at those terms without their historical proper contexts. They will Glenn Beck that terminology, and do that at your own peril, man. Do not make the typical ignorant Trump supporter own the terminology as a badge of honor. It's unlikely that they're even aware how stupid this shit works, but we must be. We've heard political commentators like Chauncey DeVega say he refuses to call the alt-right by their preferred descriptors because he doesn't want to let them change the definition of who and what they actually are, which are white ethno-state nationalists. They are in fact Nazis by any other name. They leave out the word supremacist because that word doesn't serve them. That part is implied and understood without being said. And so to say it makes you sound like a racist, and they don't want to be called racists. They reject that they are in any more, they actually reject that they're any more racist than any other race that exhibits pride in their heritage or culture. But there is no white culture beyond racism because they don't understand what whiteness or culture actually are. Tim Wise can explain it better than I can, and I really do recommend looking into his body of work if you're unfamiliar with him. And I'm guessing that you probably are, because most people, just racism is the water we swim in. We don't even see it when it exists, and he does a really good job of introducing the concepts and the ideas, the reality really that people of color and to an extent any marginalized group. The other mistake that Fox is making, besides normalizing the word socialist, is that they can't help but contribute to the success of the successful. Now, if you remember, Trump wasn't the most popular or even realistic presidential candidate. Because he is bombastic and outlandish, he received the most free news coverage that any other presidential candidate has ever received ever in history. And the more the media covered him, the more popular he got, and the more popular he got, the more media covered him. So it was like, I mean, we kind of created this positive effects loop of Trump. It doesn't, it's there's a saying. What is it? I don't care what you say, just spell my name right. It's not a hard name to spell right. Maybe it is for him. He misspells his wife's name, so who knows. The other... Okay, so, that being said, I got a secret I want to tell you. They're doing the same thing to AOC. The more they cover, the more popular she gets, and the more popular she gets, the more they cover. Jordan Peterson's actually having a similar effect on the algorithm on YouTube. It's how advertisers use psychology to sell you shit you wouldn't ordinarily want and certainly don't need. The capitalist model uses attention as its fuel. They don't want to give Trump or AOC all of the free advertising, but they can't be the only outlet not talking about the latest stupid tweet. They miss out, they become irrelevant in a maelstrom of outrage and ridicule. Subsequently, only the most basic human emotions and reactions are appealed to, and then you have what we have now, which is an idiocracy and a mediocrity. I don't know. I mean, it's common sense to think we want the most common of people in positions of authority, right? I mean, do you want your brain surgeon to be as dumb as you are? Do you want your tattoo artist to have the artistic skills that are equal to yours? Like, obviously not. Obviously, we recognize certain people are better and worse at us at doing specific tasks. Some of us are considerably worse than most people. Okay, let's say if you have an IQ rating lower than 82, you're less competent at most tasks than most people. Jordan Peterson does a big long spiel about how if you have an IQ that low, you are essentially useless to the army and therefore society. And because that's the case, equality of outcome can never actually really be a thing to expect or advocate for. And subsequently, nobody does. It's a boogeyman, straw man created by members on the right to debate the logic, quote unquote, of their argument against equality of outcome. But it's really just an acknowledgement of the acknowledgement that some of our children are born of lesser gods. Like, that's the reality of it. What the left mean by equality of opportunity means equality under the law and societal rules that we all play the capitalistic social dominance hierarchy game under. We've established certain minority groups that can legally or morally, for that matter, be discriminated against. I don't know if I made that clear. We've established laws that that restrict discrimination, is what I'm saying, against specific groups, and that's what they have a problem with, because they want equality too. They think that it's not fair that certain people can't be discriminated against. I'll try to explain it better. I'm not judging the validity of their argument, okay? I'm saying that the rules were so bent, so maligned from the jump, that it threatened to throw society, American civility, into an upheaval. And so we changed the rules, and now the rules aren't apparently fair going in the other direction. Because an advantage was begotten under an unleveled playing field, leveling it in the fourth quarter isn't going to legitimize the winner of the game. It's a chicken that really can't be fucked. It's a quagmire. The only way to do it is to start the game over. And guess who doesn't want to start the game over with the score zip, and 0 on the clock when they were ahead? Shit's obvious to people born in the parking lot of the baseball diamond. But to those born on third base with the 7-point lead, they don't want the rules to change. And because they didn't make the rules, they think it's unfair to punish them by changing them. These points have been made over time, and some people are actually willing to give up their advantage in the spirit of fair play. I mean, let's say the Pats. Should the Pats be disqualified from a Super Bowl title today because the Pats cheated in 1999? Peterson addresses this by creating games to play and not to play to win. He says that quite often. He goes over it in his book and does a decent job, except for the part where he doesn't acknowledge the chicken is already fucked. The winners and losers decided, the rules in place, and the hierarchy illegitimate, corrupt, and self-perpetuating. The whole idea that he who creates the past, he who controls the present controls the past, and who controls the past controls the future. That I believe that was Orwell that kind of came up with that idea. But the inequity is at odds with the ideals of the right, regardless of their current action as constitutionalists. That's not what our Constitution says. It tells us, the people, that it is within our rights to administrate a government that adheres to the principles of fair play. So the question is, does it? I don't think it does. It would seem we're being taxed without being represented. When we elect a representative under the premise that they will serve the will of the people but then default on their campaign promises, they, our representatives, throw their hands in the air and they claim we're being obstructed by the other side. They don't want to play along. Well, they're better off if only half of the people hate and blame them at any given time. When it gets to be around 70% hate them, which is it's around that, they have a situation similar to what Iraq had in the early 1990s. So what if both sides are colluding with each other against the interests of the people they represent on behalf of who funds their campaigns? What if both sides are guilty of gaming the system? What if that's the real conspiracy? That the Republicans and Democrats are colluding with each other against the will of the people and in favor of the corporations that we actually live in accordance to the will of? What if the evil government that the left love is controlled by the evil corporations that the right do? What if this is a shell game? It's a sham to keep us broken, dependent, relying on our oppressors. What if our values and sensibilities are being molded to reflect an ideology that keeps the status quo in place and the hierarchy intact regardless of its illegitimacy? I guess I'm digressing from the point, but I think you see it. Equality of opportunity means something specific. Equality of outcome means some alternative to that specific. Okay, so here are a couple of examples. Let's do one positive, one minus. I don't know if I'll be able to do this to make this make sense, but I'm going to try anyway, because I believe in you. One, we should have an equal opportunity to compete for jobs and positions in the social class. 2, we should all be considered equal when determining who is the most qualified for any specific job, function, position, or title. Okay, so obviously Peter Dinklage can't expect to be equally considered to be drafted by the Lakers, just like Shaquille O'Neal can't legitimately be equally considered to play the role of Tyrion Lannister. We're born unequal in different domains. But it's disingenuous to imply the left are so ridiculous, well, until they are that ridiculous and demand that we suspend our basic sensibilities for the inclusion of ridiculous applications, which arguably, to some sense, they have, and thus we have the circus world meme. This is why equality of outcome is the right idea, because there cannot be an equality of opportunity. Then an equality of outcome is necessary. Why can't all actors be paid the same? Why can't all basketball players be paid the same? Because of markets. And I'll get back to that idea in a minute. Here are 2 examples of equality of outcome. 1, we should all have the same outcome in terms of services. An equal outcome would be something like, if I'm poor and black and I call the police or an ambulance, then I should expect a police officer or an ambulance to come as equally, quickly, as someone who is rich and white. That would be an equality of outcome. And equality, not inequality. 2, what the right pretend that equality of outcome is that someone who sits around and smokes pot and plays video games all day is entitled to a yacht and a mansion, or at least a meal and shelter, and they do not. The problem is that the right and left aren't talking about the same things when it comes to equality. Both actually do want fairness, but can't agree on what fairness is. Is it fair to treat all people equally? I don't think so. It's not fair to treat a woman the same as a man or an adult as a child, even if that's treating them equally to the letter, if not the spirit of the law. We can understand this in how we address the problems of disability. We require businesses to provide accessibility to folks with disabilities, ramps, handrails around toilets, etc. So we know what creating an environment of equality looks like. We also know what it looks like when that sense of doing the right thing is abused. We've seen business owners attacked by lawyers of disabled advocate groups for failing to comply, and sued for damages even though no disabled person had ever patronized that business. That's a byproduct of putting a price tag on everything in terms of punishments and rewards. It's a byproduct of capitalism. People are going to cheat, and sometimes they're going to get away with it. But that doesn't mean we should just level the playing field and make the rules fair, just because some asshole will always figure out a way to game the system. If Jordan Peterson is smarter than me, then he should know the difference even more so than I do. As our social dominance hierarchy exists, he is more competent than I am and deserves more as a result of said competence. But what if he's not more confident than I am? What if he's just more credentialed? What if he just had access to an education that I didn't? Consider our president. Would you describe Donald Trump as being exceptionally competent? I wouldn't. Einstein, who was arguably one of the most competent men who ever lived, concerned himself by how many brilliant janitors are resigned to sweeping elementary schools, holding the keys of human evolution in their minds while their bodies were forced by circumstances beyond their control into the menial task of undignified labor. He's also quoted as saying, when asked, "What's it like to be a genius?" He said, "Ask Nikola Tesla." Because all of Tesla's ideas and inventions were stolen by Thomas Edison, and sold to conglomerates for obscene wealth and notoriety. Tesla died like Edgar Allan Poe did, alone and broke. Is that equality of outcome, or is that equality of opportunity? Are they exceptions to the rule? What about Eli Whitney? Do you really believe he, a slave owner, invented the cotton gin, or do you think maybe he got credit for something his slave invented? I don't know. Fact check this. I'm not sure about that. I'd be interested to find out, though, as to whether or not Eli Whitney actually invented that. Here's the deal. Society needs trash collectors, servers, maids, mechanics, plumbers, as much as, probably more than, we need sports heroes, singers, actors, artists. Maybe not artists. Maybe not singers. I don't know. Why does one deserve to live in excess while the other struggles to make ends meet? Our values are informed by our priorities, that's why. Well, what do we as a society value? We're a Christian nation, right? So what are our Christian values and priorities? What did Jesus teach us? Who teaches you what Jesus taught? Did they make a buck passing on to you the true teachings of Jesus? Do you think if something evil exists, it might possibly lie to you in order to sell you something to benefit themselves? Let me ask you something. If you were the devil, how would you go about relating with people to convince them to operate in ways that are contrary to their best interests, to undermine the better good? What would you do? I think I'd do it exactly the way it's being done now. I would call good evil and I would call evil good. Now, what a lot of people have noticed in the majority group in America take grievance with is affirmative action. That's an inequality of outcome and opportunity. That's reverse racism against white people, right? If you take a guess that I'm in favor of affirmative action, you'd be wrong. And you'd also be wrong about the reason I'm against it. I'm against it because it doesn't actually do anything other than cause people who are ignorant about the law to think they are now on the opposite side of discrimination because nobody educated them as to how and what the law actually does and what it pretends to do. What it does, it incentivizes employers to not be racist. That's all it does. It doesn't require business owners to hire unqualified black people or they're qualified white people, or men versus women, or disabled or gay or whatever marginalized and protected group you happen to be born as. The government isn't requiring anyone to do anything in affirmative action. It simply rewards businesses who hire and advance them in their careers. That protected class person doesn't get a free job and a free promotion. They just can't be discriminated against. The reason that had to be incentivized is because you can't prove that someone is being discriminated against. They could never prove it any more than the real reason that that girl didn't go out with you on a date because you were bald or short. They just chose someone else for their own reasons. Affirmative action doesn't discriminate against white people. It just makes discrimination against protected classes less likely and their promotion somewhere closer to the level of fair. Even though fair, it will never be. In this case, close enough. Close enough to progress. I'm against it because nobody explains it to the general public. And most of the people go around thinking black people are getting entitlements and free shit, handouts and special treatment. They really believe this, and they say it without a shred of embarrassment because they think they're right about it. They aren't. They're uninformed. Now my cynical side thinks that that's the point. Do something practically useless in terms of actually helping protected class people advance themselves socioeconomically while simultaneously creating a profound resentment in the majority members of their social economic class of a different majority race. I might have been repetitive or redundant there, I don't know. It'd be evil genius if they did that kind of racism on purpose, wouldn't it? That might even fall into the category of systemic racism. I'm not going to make this channel about racism, systemic or otherwise, or even civil rights primarily, but those things are important to me, so they will come up. I'm not a social justice warrior, okay? I'm more like a social justice magi in a social justice warrior's body. I don't even know what the hell I'm politically. I'm not a Democrat, I'm not a Republican. I have a hierarchy of identity that I use to describe myself. And first and foremost, beyond being Chris Thomas, like everybody else is, I'm also human. Then in no certain order goes male, my age, my ethnicity, my nationality, my religion or lack thereof, my relationship status, my relationship to drugs and alcohol status. I'm an omnivore. I like terrible music. In fact, shitty music is the basis by which I made most of my friends. You know, because we shared a cultural identity. It was us against the world. That's what I see with these neo-Nazis. They belong to a common culture that views themselves as in opposition with the world. Most of them are going to grow out of this stupid shit. And they'll never admit they were even a part of it. The internet won't let them forget, though. They won't let them be forgiven or forgotten. So they'll double down on it. They'll sink with this stupid shit, and they'll be defending it because they're irredeemable in the eyes of our society. Unless you go all Dave Rubin and become an ideology trader, sellout, etc. And that's how I see Rubin. He's a dumb guy. He's just not a very smart guy. People call him dumb all the time, and right? Accept him with open arms. Accept the part where he's gay, and they're using him as a token to convince the more sensible members of their own party how bigoted they aren't. Candace Owens, same thing. Even Tommy Lauren is a useful idiot, rage, Barbie, Nazi sex object to those guys. Nothing exists in a vacuum. I might start out talking about equality, and by the end of this video I'm talking about the Bible or psychology. We need to address all of it in order to address any of it, though. I'll try to stay on task in the future. That was always my problem in high school, because there's this hub where all subjects intersect. It's like there's history, but then there's also a history of language, and then there's a history of science, and then there's a history of art, and every subject has a history, and it requires a specific language to learn about. The history of biology and engineering. There's already a history of technology. Come back full circle, Game of Thrones. That opening sequence with all the mechanics and the panoramic view, where you're flying over the whole of Westeros, and things are popping up, and things are growing, and things are turning. Man, what do you think that's about? We've been a technological species the whole time. We've been mastering tech since before the Bible. We've been making magic by manipulating energy and matter since before the dawn of this civilization. Full disclosure, I just watched Rogan and Hancock the other day talk about Graham's new book, America Before. This shit will eventually come to be common knowledge. Alright, well, I've gone on long enough. I actually will edit this video. I might leave this part out, though, while I'm talking about editing it. Yeah, thanks for watching. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. Only with people that you know, love, and trust. Like me and you. You fucks.